tonight. One additional COVID-19 death recorded as at yesterday, November 25, as well as 53 new COVID-19 cases and 98 recoveries. The Ministry of Health and Wellness announces that antigen testing is being piloted at 9 public health facilities.
We are happy to say that today we are able to deploy these tests. We are going to be administering the tests on real people who qualify to do the test, but observing, collecting the information, looking at it.
Minister of National Security Dr. Harris Chang describes the killings last weekend, especially the killing of the 8-year-old woman and her 2 granddaughters, as savage.
I've just gone through a very bad week. The savagery and brutality of the criminal gangs in Jamaica is unequal.
And Minister without portfolio, Senator Matthew Samuda and other stakeholders toured the Rio Cobre Juvenile Correctional Center yesterday to view the progress of the new classrooms and dorms under construction.
Well, the boys here will be able to ensure that their classroom experience is significantly improved in January, and that's a big ticket item for us as we continue to push the rehabilitation element.
Good evening. The island has recorded 1 additional COVID-19 death. In the meantime, the country yesterday recorded 53 new COVID-19 cases and 98 recoveries. The deceased, a 75-year-old male from St. James, died from the coronavirus and was the lone COVID-19 related fatality on record for the day. This takes the overall coronavirus death toll to 248. 2 other COVID-19 deaths that occurred yesterday are under investigation. The 53 newly confirmed COVID-19 cases takes the total of cases on record for the island to 10,541, while the 98 recoveries means that 5,721 persons have now recovered from the virus in Jamaica. Now, of the newly confirmed cases, 28 are females and 25 are males, ranging in age from 5 to 87 years. The cases were recorded in Kingston and St. Andrew with 21 cases. St. Anne and St. Catherine recorded 8 cases. Manchester and Trelawney, 5 cases. St. Elizabeth, 2 cases, while St. James, Clarendon, St. Thomas and Westmoreland recorded 1 case each. There are 17 moderately ill and 12 critically ill patients among the 4,428 active cases now under observation in Jamaica. In other news, the Ministry of Health and Wellness announced that antigen testing is being piloted at 9 public health facilities. More on this story with Nathisha Johnson.
The Ministry of Health and Wellness has commenced the pilot of antigen testing for coronavirus at 9 health facilities island-wide. Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton, while speaking to journalists following the demonstration of the antigen testing procedure at the Spanish Town Hospital yesterday, said that the activities under the pilot will be observed by representatives of 12 private laboratories, which has been in touch with suppliers to import the tests.
New test that is to be administered, the antigen test, 2 types, both approved by WHO PAHO, which we have been talking about some time now. The process has been to get the approval from PAHO to train or have PAHO train persons who will administer the test. So they introduce them to the technology and train them onto the use of both antigen tests. We have involved both the public system and the private sector under the guidance of Dr. Hamilton here, head of our public health lab. And we are happy to say that today we are able to deploy these tests initially in a pilot phase involving 9 locations across the country in the public health system, and then after which the private labs, having observed the pilot phase for about a month to see, that everything works well, which means we're going to be administering the tests on real people who qualify to do the test, but observing, collecting the information, looking at it. After a month, then the private labs, and there are about 12, I understand, of them across the country, who have been in touch with suppliers and so can source, will be entitled now to offer that service in their own private setting for a fee. So we anticipate that in the next month or so, both private and public will have the test, and it will be administered across the country, which will certainly add to the capacity that we have, and of course add another dimension to testing. In this instance, this is a half an hour or 30-minute test, as opposed to the PCR test, which takes some time.
Dr. Tufton said that the antigen will only be conducted on persons displaying symptoms of COVID-19.
So this is a very good and meaningful development for testing in the country. There are some protocols that apply. The tests are administered under certain conditions. There is one that requires a machine, one that doesn't, and that's part of the pilot phase to observe and to see what is happening. The tests are administered to symptomatic patients, so patients that have symptoms, because that's when you get the most accuracy and effectiveness. And if you get a negative in that case, the persons are recommended to do a PCR test. Yes. So we have to put some measures in place to ensure that in adding the capacity, we're also ensuring that the information that we get, both for the interest of the patient, but also in terms of the management of the pandemic, we get the right information, because otherwise we could create some chaos and it would not be good for public health and for planning purposes. There are many tests out there, I want to close by saying, and there are many applicants who are seeking to introduce tests, rapid tests, 15-minute tests, blood sample tests, and many are claiming to do different things. We have to be guided by the science. We have to be guided by the science, and we depend on our multilateral partners, which we are a member of, in this case PAHO, WHO, to sanction the tests that we sanction. And right now, these are the 2 antigen tests that have been sanctioned, and these are the tests that we have been trained in and that we are now going to be administering. The pilot has started in the 9 locations, and from there on, the private sector will also participate.
The ministry, in thanking the team, indicated that on completion of the pilot, operators of the private labs will be able to source and administer the tests for a fee, while pointing out that the service will be free of cost in designated public health facilities.
And I want to just close by using the opportunity to thank the public health team, Dr. Hamilton and her team, for presiding over the process, for conducting and overseeing the training, for adding additional training where necessary, and now for providing the supervision to ensure that the process has integrity. I want to also thank the private labs that have participated and are going to be offering the tests, because that's very important. Another important dimension to what is now on display is that this is going to involve the private labs, so the public and the private sector. The public free, private labs for a fee, but will give the full spread across the country, which is a very positive development.
I'm Nithisha Johnson, reporting for Mello TV News.
Thank you, Nithisha. Meanwhile, Minister Tufton, as part of his 2-day visit to Western Jamaica, launched COVID-19 signs in Sam Sharp Square in Montego Bay, St. James. This as part of the ministry's ongoing COVID-19 response efforts. Minister Tufton is urging everyone to act responsibly this Christmas season as the country copes with and tries to stop the spread of COVID-19.
It is very clear to us that we expect, in the usual custom of Christmas, more people to go out, more people to shop, more persons coming in the island and wanting to move around. And indeed, some of them probably won't even observe the protocols, even though we want them to observe it. So we have a number of strategies to deal with that. And one of the key strategies is to get to the streets, to remind persons that they must put on their mask, they must wear the mask. And this is common lingo, this is common language. We want everybody to understand, that's why we put it that way. It might not sound grammatically correct, but we know it communicates with the population. We're saying to every Jamaican, whether you are the vendor, the bartender, the shopper, the passerby, the looking on, whomever you are, act responsibly this Christmas season and New Year season by wearing a mask and, very importantly, demanding of persons who are speaking to you to wear their mask.
Dr. Tufton also pointed out that persons, even essential workers, are becoming fatigued due to the ongoing pandemic.
In a sense, it is very understandable why people are going to be tempted to go out. The country is suffering from COVID fatigue, and we have accepted that. We have seen signs of that. People have been locked up or restricted for the greater part of the year. Many of us gets very sentimental about Christmas. Christmas is normally the favorite time of the year for many people, or perhaps one of the most depressing times of the year for those who don't have loved ones and family and so on. So either way you take it, you're likely to run into a situation that is more in keeping with the culture, which is to go out, to shop more, to engage more with people. And what we're saying is, if you're doing that, remember this. This message is very important. Because what we fear is that after the season, you're going to run into a situation where the virus spreads, you have a spike. And the consequences of a spike is more restrictions, and we don't want that. Staffing is in place, but there is always the challenge of the fatigue that our staff has been going through. Public health workers, frontline workers, even some of the other frontline workers, the police and so on, have had a rough 8 months dealing with the COVID pandemic. And as a consequence, there is no doubt that many people are tired, many people are burnt out. We announced a wellness program for staff recently to try and give some breaks, and we're bringing additional staff on board. But I believe they are committed, and I believe that they're going to do what is necessary.
The health minister further pointed out that the Cornwall Regional Hospital is equipped to treat and deal with health matters despite the ongoing renovation work being done on the main building.
Regional, as a provider of hospital services, is intact and has offered services to thousands and perhaps hundreds and thousands every year since the rehabilitation started. So there is no issue as to whether or not Cornwall Regional can offer antigen testing. The facilities are there, the doctors are there, and we have made adequate provisions to deal with that. So I'm not worried about that. The truth is, anybody who lives in this area and requires hospital care know they can go to Cornwall Regional. Don't confuse the rehabilitation of the main building with the provision of services. Those services are there even while we try to correct the issues at the main building.
Still making news tonight, the police are seeking the public's assistance to locate 48-year-old Clifton Martin, otherwise called Baga, of March Pen Road, Spanish Town, who has been missing since November 16. He is of dark complexion, medium build, and about 6 feet tall. Reports from the Montego Bay Police coming into our news center are that Martin was last seen at Charles Gordon Market in the parish at about 9 a.m. wearing a purple and white shirt, multicolored shorts, and a pair of white shoes. Efforts to contact him have proven futile. Anyone knowing the whereabouts of Clifton Martin is being asked to contact the Montego Bay Police at 876-978-8452, Police Emergency 119, or the nearest police station. In other news tonight, 27-year-old Ricardo Taylor, otherwise called Snake Man and Hothead of Frontier District, Port Maria in St. Mary, was fatally shot during a confrontation with a licensed firearm holder after he was caught stealing crops at a farm in Trinity District in the parish on November 24. Reports coming into our news center tonight are that at approximately 6:05 a.m., the licensed firearm holder went to his farm and saw Taylor and another man stealing bananas and plantains. He then called out to the men. One of them ran. However, Taylor was fatally shot after he confronted the licensed firearm holder. The matter was reported to the Independent Commission of Investigations, INDECOM. Continuing with the news tonight, Minister of National Security Dr. Horace Chang has described the killings that took place over the weekend, especially the killing of the 80-year-old woman and her 2 granddaughters, as savage. Here is Tamar McHale with more on this story.
The Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, has broken his silence on the flare-up of crime that has rocked some parts of the island, especially in Spanish Town, St. Catherine. There have been 6 reported murders in the police division between Saturday and Monday, which includes the brutal slaying of an 81-year-old grandmother and 2 of her granddaughters ages 10 and 6. Dr. Chang, while addressing the matter at a function at the police commissioner's office yesterday, labeled the killings as savage and said that the police will be pursuing all leads to bring the perpetrators to justice.
It's critical for me to get the kind of sustainable reduction in criminal activity and provide the police force with the tools required to fight criminality, and in particular violent criminality in Jamaica, which have been demonstrated over and over. We have just gone through a very bad week. The savagery and brutality of the criminal gangs in Jamaica is unequaled. But we as a society, we are keeping together. Commend the police force. The work of a police officer cannot be summed up in an 8-hour shift. In fact, once a policeman, always a policeman. That's what they say, and this is what they have. The criminals on the street see it that way. That's why they are now interfering in their families, even at home. Now can it be accurately measured in terms of daily tasks and assignments completed? The service of a law enforcement officer is founded on a selfless commitment to the people they serve, and a sense of purpose and determination to create a safer Jamaica.
The security minister also pinpointed the 2 pieces of legislation he says will be amended. For him, the changes to these laws are needed to keep up with criminals and their practices.
The primary tools and individuals involved in killing Jamaicans for over 40 years. Right? Over 1,000 for over 30. Every year we lose 1,000. Yet we don't have a modern firearms act. It's going to the meet. So it's lying around here. We have, as I said, we have activated it, and I'll get it in the House and get it through Parliament in this parliamentary year, which means by March. The anti-gang legislation is less than 5-year-old. Gangs is the cause of criminal activity. We have organized criminal gangs murdering Jamaicans, attacking police, undermining our institutions, corrupting our institutions across. They are well-resourced, have plenty of money, and they are working hard to damage our society. And we only have a 5-year-old anti-gang act. It's being reviewed now because it was brought in only 4 years ago. We are committed, and I've given the Prime Minister my undertaking as part of the government to bring forward as quickly as possible during this term the kind of legislation required to provide the police with adequate legislative tools. Because I've learned in this, without the legislation, with the law in force, you cannot get the job done.
Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, Senator Matthew Samuda, also condemned the killing of the elderly woman and her granddaughters.
I think it's an act of savagery. I don't think the country or any well-thinking member of society is comfortable with what we would have seen transpire over the weekend. Quite frankly, it's a dastardly act, and I think Minister Chang has already spoken to our resolute approach to ensuring that those responsible are brought to justice. But it's not an act that should leave anybody in Jamaica comfortable. And unfortunately, over the last 20 years, it seems that criminals want to act with more bravado each time. So I see you one and raise you another one, which is part of the problem we've had over the last 20 years.
For Mello TV News, I am Tamara McHale.
Thank you, Tamara. Still making news tonight, Minister without portfolio, Senator Matthew Samuda, along with other stakeholders, toured the Rio Cobre Juvenile Correctional Center yesterday to to view the progress of the new classrooms and dorms under construction. Here is Ophelia Miller with more on this story.
40 wards in the state's Rio Cobre Juvenile Correctional Center in Spanish Town will benefit from additional housing and learning facilities come early next year. Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, Senator Matthew Samuda, made the announcement while touring the classroom and housing blocks currently under construction.
So the scope of the projects and what you would have seen today, right behind me is the staff entry room, which will facilitate changing rooms and barracks for officers to rest before entering facilities, so they're able to change and ensure that when they enter facilities, they're appropriately attired, and it provides greater security for the facility as well. You'd have also seen something that we're quite proud of, which is a new classroom block that will be ready to go in the first week of January. So students, well, the boys here will be able to ensure that their classroom experience is significantly improved in January, and that's a big ticket item for us as we continue to push the rehabilitation element of our focus. The other area you would have seen under construction is the new dorms that will facilitate consolidation of this facility with another. Now that allows us to realize efficiencies and to even consolidate our rehabilitation efforts for the young boys to ensure that when they come into our facilities, they leave with a different outlook and that the rehabilitation process works. So generally it's a phased project. Some parts will be ready, I'm told, within a week. Other parts will be ready within a month, and the new block will be ready, I believe, early February.
Senator Matthew Samuda says that a critical aspect of their mentorship program could not be facilitated due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic.
But I think the recent announcements of CXC passes, certainly from our adult and young wards, should make the country satisfied. Now, it's by all means nowhere near a perfect system, and we want to expand the access and the interest in the educational programs. But we can't deny that it's moving in the right direction. We always need to expand it, we always need to put more energy into it. One of the things that would have hurt us this year is the inability to bring in external persons into our facilities because of the COVID threat. So a critical element of mentorship is not being realized in the way we would want it to. But this is a global pandemic. It's not a problem unique to us, but we're doing everything that we can in the interim.
The senator further expressed that the ministry have been working very hard to dismantle gangs in the St. Catherine Northern Police Division.
St. Catherine North has had a long-standing problem. It has been plagued by a gang feud that is well known to the nation. We have been actively pursuing the demolition of the gangs in that area, most notably the Klansman gang. We have over 60 members of the Klansman gang in custody. Now, there are probably close to 200 more that we are targeting, but there's definitely a lot of work taking place in the area. But I think important to note, and a fact that we cannot escape, is that this area was under much better control under recent states of emergency that would have come to an end. And denying that those measures were working simply defies logic and statistics.
I'm Ophelia Miller reporting for Mello TV News.
Thank you, Ophelia. And continuing with the news, the St. Catherine North Police have charged 31-year-old Robert Thompson, who is an inmate of the St. Catherine Adult Correctional Center, with murder, introducing contraband in a penal institution, and assault at common law following the murder of 32-year-old correctional officer Jamel Westney. Reports coming into our news center are that at about 9:15 a.m. on Friday, November 13, Westney and other correctional officers were attending to prisoners when Thompson allegedly used a sharp object to inflict a wound to Westney's back. Westney was pronounced dead at the hospital. Thompson was charged following an interview with his attorney. His court date is being finalized. Continuing with the news tonight, the Ministry of Justice has added 4 attorneys at law to the list of notaries public. Opposition Senator Donna Scott Motley former president of the Jamaica Bar Association, Jacqueline Cummings, Janice Nelson Brown, and Lancelot Newton Clark Jr. were presented with commissioning instruments by Justice Minister Delroy Chuck at his ministry on November 24. Now this brings the total of appointees since the start of 2020 to 11. Now in his address to the small gathering, Minister Chuck noted that the Office of Notary Public is significant as the designation is internationally recognized. He pointed out that their services would very likely be in demand to authenticate foreign public documents under the recently passed Apostille Act. The Justice Minister also announced that the legislative agenda for his ministry during this fiscal year includes modernizing the Notaries Public Act. There are currently 96 notaries public for the island of Jamaica. However, Minister Chuck noted that for various reasons, many are inactive. He urged the new notaries public to play their part to revive activities among their counterparts. Still tonight, the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports has signed an implementing partnership agreement with the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, as part of local efforts to eradicate violence against women and girls. This has been done through the Bureau of Gender Affairs under the European Union EU-funded Spotlight Initiative. Now, the Spotlight Initiative is a global multi-year partnership between the EU and the United Nations to eliminate all forms of violence against this vulnerable group. The agreement was signed during the national observance of International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women yesterday, which traditionally marked the launch of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Portfolio Minister, the Honourable Olivia Grange, in her address at the event said gender-based violence takes many forms: psychological, physical, sexual and economic. And those are the stories making news. I'll return with a recap. We'll now take a break and then join Christopher Scott with sports.